Welcome to another episode of the Jet Series NFL podcast. My name is DJ Demerit, and I am joined yet again by my co-hosts, Tyler Smith and Ian O'Malley. What's going on, fellas?
Hey, what's going on, man? Ian, how you doing, bud?
I'm good. How are you, Smitty?
Can't complain. Another beautiful day down here in Florida.
Yeah. Keep rubbing it in. I mean, it's supposed to get up to 60 the next 2 days up here. So
okay, hey, that's warm up there. That's real warm.
That's warm up there for this time of the year. And I mean, the nice thing is when it gets to 60, when it starts getting a little warmer in March. You got March Madness next week. You got baseball opening day 2 weeks after that. Even though the NFL is the sport we're talking about, I still think baseball is the best opening day.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then you got the NFL draft at the end of April, and then you got basketball and hockey playoffs. So I mean, it's a great time.
Still got a lot of snow up there?
No, we got no snow up here.
Okay.
There's no snow up here, so the snow's actually been going for a little while because it rained a week or two ago. So it's looking good, and I think once this episode recording is over, I'm going to open the blinds and see what the world looks like outside of this room.
Awesome. Now, do you think the groundhog sees a shadow this year, or how do you think that's going to play out?
Well, I think he saw a shadow, and then it was supposed to be 6 more weeks of winter, and I think we're now on week 5. So,
oh wow, okay, so
next week, St. Patty's Day.
Yeah.
Obviously, my last name is O'Malley. I'm Irish. Gonna go get that Shamrock Shake. That's Wednesday. And then the next day, is the first Thursday of March Madness, which is one of my favorite sports days of the year. So it's looking real good up here in good old Rhode Island.
Awesome. Yeah, we don't have that groundhog problem down here really because winter never really happens. So glad you guys are doing great up there. Glad the weather's amazing. I think we're hitting again 80 today. So awesome, man. We got some sports on deck. I too can't agree more. I love opening day for baseball. That's my favorite sport to watch. First, it just juices me up. Reminds me of Little League all over again. Because everyone getting hyped up and coming together and parades. So, yeah, what a time. So
and hopefully all these ballparks will allow fans back. At some capacity. I know a lot of them are doing it, so it'll be good to get fans back out there watching games, getting the seats filled up as we continue to go through this pandemic. So.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of teams, I mean, obviously it's not a baseball podcast, but a lot of teams, have a chance to be good this year. It could be an exciting season. So it'd be nice to get fans in the ballpark. I know a couple of different people have said that they want to go to a game with me. And obviously, depending on seating capacity and ticket prices, that's going to be determined whether or not that happens.
A huge factor. I mean, hopefully the pandemic comes to a halt as a whole, speaking globally, speaking especially nationally. But the effect that the impact has had on sports is it's getting a little bit ridiculous as far as what the environment looks like, what how the whole business of sports affected, impacted as far as like you mentioned, ticket sales are as the cost going up per seat because they have a threshold or a benchmark to compete with, and they can't do that because they're at 50% capacity. So. It'll be interesting to see, how it starts to unfold, how we get through this pandemic as a whole, and I can't wait for it to be over. I would love to go to a Tampa game September, October. So, yeah, let's hope for the best.
Yeah, well, one person that the pandemic seems to not be affecting is Dak Prescott, and I figured that's a guy we're going to talk about a little bit today.
Yes, we are.
He's a man with a big pocket now. With a deep pocket with a lot of money in it.
So the deal was, for those of you at home, $160 million with $126 guaranteed. That's over 4 years, and a $66 million signing bonus. So, I mean, you guys want to walk us through that? I know we've been waiting for this news for years on end. Finally escapes the franchise tag. So, yeah, what are your thoughts?
I mean, we started talking about this deed 2 years ago. Actually, over 2 years ago, during 2018 season, when you and I were watching games up at Johnson and Wales.
Yep, watching Dallas play horribly, and
watching Dallas play, because they played New Orleans on a Thursday night, and they played Philly the following week. Both, Joe and Troy were there. Yep. Obviously, your favorite broadcast team.
Not true for the folks at home.
But yeah, and then just watching Dallas and being frustrated, like why were they not better with all the talent that they had? And defensively, they were playing the best they played defensively, since Jimmy Johnson was the coach. And offensively, obviously they had the high-paid offensive line against Zeke, who led the league in rushing, and then Dak, who was, a playoff caliber quarterback, and yet offensively they were 22nd in the league in scoring. And you just watch him and think, why are they not better? And then you watch Dak, and then I would think, he was just playing slow. So, and what I mean by playing slow is he was reading defenses slow. He was both pre-snap and post-snap, and he just wasn't playing as, I don't want to use the term easy because playing football at any level isn't easy, but it just wasn't as easy to watch as when you watch the top quarterbacks and the top teams in the league. So when it became apparent that he was the next quarterback for a contract extension, I thought, they should probably try to sign Dak kind of on the cheap, 24, 25 million. If you need to go a little bit over that, but, don't pay him Aaron Rodgers or Russell Wilson money. Well, he's now making more than Aaron Rodgers or Russell Wilson money, because that was the approach, and that was the approach that Dallas took, was try to sign him on the cheap. But Dak played his hand, and I think had Dallas been a little less stubborn and had a little more foresight and saw that the salary cap was going to go up, you could have ended up paying him Ryan Tannehill or Jimmy Garoppolo money, and that contract would be, it would probably be a little close to outdated now.
Yeah, by a few million.
Probably a few million. He wouldn't have made what he made, but Jerry Jones wouldn't have had to pay as much money now as he's going to pay had he just given up a little bit more in the spring of 2019.
Right. So he kind of shot himself in the foot there.
He did. And look, this is kind of Jerry Jones's history. It goes all the way back to Emmitt Smith, where Emmitt Smith held out going into at the start of the 93 season, or he held out after the 92 season when they won the Super Bowl. Emmitt won the rushing title. I believe his first career rushing title. And he held out. He wanted to be paid like the highest running back in the league, which at the time was Barry Sanders. He held out. Jerry said no, but then he held out the first two games, and Dallas lost the first two games. And Jerry Jones, being the guy that he is, paid Emmitt what he wanted, and Emmitt came back, led the league in rushing again, and Dallas won another Super Bowl. And it's kind of just always played its way on that when, Jerry, he'll wait to pay people, but then he always loses the negotiation. He loses the negotiation, but he wins the back page. And that's kind of who the Dallas Cowboys under Jerry Jones, that's kind of who the Dallas Cowboys are anyway. That's kind of who they were under the old, regime there. But, it's kind of, it's more important for Jerry to be on Broadway and for Jerry to be talked about than it is for Jerry to do what's right. And that's why Dallas hasn't been a great team since Jimmy Johnson left.
Well, yeah, you make a good point. It's kind of been the Jerry Jones show since as long as we can remember. We've talked about it year in and year out. He was very heavily involved in that CeeDee Lamb draft pick last year's draft. You see it all the time. You see how coach, whoever comes in, and Jason Garrett, and now in Mike McCarthy, it's, this is Jerry Jones's team. It's just, I'm the owner, I'm the GM, and I'm damn near the head coach. And if you don't like it, you can get out. And I'm going to kind of stick you under my thumb and make sure you're doing everything the way I want it done, as opposed to what's best for the organization. I think that's where they kind of struggle. You talked about it. You hit the nail on the head. Their personnel groupings. It's like you come out with weapons. You have one of the top-ranked offensive lines 2-3 years in a row. You come in with weapons like Amari Cooper and Michael Gallup and Randall Cobb and Jason Witten. At the beginning of the season, you had Dak Prescott, and then you have Ezekiel Elliott, who's there's a reason he got the extension when he did. He rushed for over 1,000 yards. He's a Pro Bowl player. I believe he won Rookie of the Year, or was he the runner-up for that?
No, he won Rookie of the Year, and Dak was the runner-up.
That's correct. Okay. Now this is a guy who's not producing all of a sudden. You got Dallas's defense who can't stop anybody. They started off kind of hot this year, and other than the defensive struggle, I think they started off kind of hot. So to get back to Dak for a second, yes, I do think this was necessary. Continue your put yourself in a position to compete in your division this year, which we know isn't that hard to win. Maybe they are an 8-9 win team with Dak Prescott under center. Smitty, what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, for the Cowboys and Dak, it's good to just put this behind you and be able to move on. And Dak gets paid. You can make the argument that Dak probably doesn't deserve to be paid as the number 2 quarterback in the league. Based off his history, he plays well. Doesn't have a playoff win. He's got one playoff appearance. And you look at this Cowboys team that does have a lot of holes. You're paying DeMarcus Lawrence $25 million a year. Now you're paying Dak. His cap hit's $22 million a year. You got Cooper getting paid $22 million a year. And for a team that's already in the red, this team's gonna have to make some moves here to free up some space that allows them to bring in some help defensively because they got a good offense. They got a great offensive line, great weapons that they can use, but if they can't get a defense that can keep them in ball games and take a little bit of pressure off Dak, are they going to win? So, they definitely need to upgrade their secondary. They need to upgrade their their linebackers. So there's still a lot of holes that they need to fill. But overall, I think it's a good deal for both sides, and I'm sure both sides are happy that they're allowed to move on, and Jerry Jones can put his focus to other positions on the roster.
Well, they're definitely happy, but I mean, both sides are definitely happy. But that, like we said with Jerry Jones, I mean, he overpays everybody. They have so many B players at best on A contracts. I mean, like I said, Dak's probably a B quarterback. He's now is one of the biggest quarterback contracts ever. You got Zeke, the funny thing was that Dak remember going into the 2019 season, Dak was supposed to be, his deal was supposed to get done. Amari Cooper was second because he was also about to because Dak and Amari Cooper were supposed to be free agents in 2020. So they were first in line. And then Zeke just completely jumped the line. Jerry Jones overpaid him by so much that no other running back will ever get a contract like that. Though, well, actually, I shouldn't say that because I'm afraid of what Dave Gettleman might pay Saquon. But that's another story. That's another discussion. And then you got DeMarcus Lawrence, who's getting, or even back to the offense, you got Amari Cooper, who's making big money. DeMarcus Lawrence, who's making big money, and since he's gotten paid, hasn't done anything. Jalen Smith, who's regressed since he got paid. And I didn't even know they were getting ready to pay Jalen Smith. I mean, looking back on it, he was also a free agent going into 2020, so I get it, but there was no discussion about his contract. He just got paid a big contract. And they're paying all these guys big money, and they're in the red, yet they need help at every position except wide receiver. They kind of need a back. Andy Dalton didn't get the job done at quarterback once he stepped in.
No,
so they need a backup quarterback. Zeke's best days are behind him at running back. The offensive line, which was once the best, was once the best offensive line in football, is now, other than Zach Martin, in shambles. I mean, Tyron Smith, he can't throw one block without getting injured. Travis Frederick, the center, is retired. They never really filled left guard and right tackle. I mean, once Ronald Leary and Doug Free went down, or once they let Ronald Leary walk and then Doug Free retired. The defensive line, DeMarcus Lawrence is supposed to be the guy, and they drafted some other guys that, Randy Gregory was a flat-out bust. Aldon Smith was their best defensive player last year. He hadn't played football since 2015. So that's how bad their defense was. Jalen Smith has been okay, but not the player that he was. Leighton Vander Esch, who I thought was going to be a star, right next to Jalen Smith.
You did.
I did. I thought those two guys would be the best tandem at linebacker in the league for years to come. And I don't even know how many games they've played together since then. Leighton Vander, look, you can't blame Leighton Vander Esch. He's got neck problems. That's not an injury you can just tape up and play with. That's an injury that, that gets serious. That ruins the rest of your life. But their secondary is a complete disaster. At least in 2018, when they finished the season ranked 6th defensively, Byron Jones was a true number 1 corner. Chidobe Awuzie was a true number 2 corner. and Jordan Lewis was their number 3. He was playing the nickel. But now kind of, you lose Byron Jones because you pay all your offensive guys, plus Jalen Smith and DeMarcus Lawrence. That now you move everybody up a slot, and you draft Trevon Diggs, but he's a rookie, and corner's a tough position to break in as a rookie, and they've had nothing at safety. So they're paying a lot of money to have to fill every position except wide receiver. They almost, and Smitty, I don't know if you agree, you probably do, they almost have to trade one of the wide receivers just to, A, get some cap space, and 2, get other players that can play.
Yeah, I do agree with that. And, they just paid Amari, and, that's a questionable deal. So, to me, I don't think if CeeDee Lamb continues to emerge and Michael Gallup continues to emerge, I can kind of see, Amari Cooper and Zeke, not being on the roster next year. And from a year from now, talking potential landing spots for them, because they're going to have to free up some money some way or another to pay guys down the road. I'm not sure what their free agents are looking like for next year or anything, but I'd expect them to at least try to rework some of these contracts out, like DeMarcus Lawrence, Amari Cooper, some of these offensive linemen that they've paid. They paid La'el Collins a few years back, and he was undrafted, so he dropped in the draft because of some off the field issues. But so they got a home run out of him. But they're definitely going to have to rework this cap around. They're sitting in the red at -7 right now. So it'll be interesting to see what they do.
And we've talked about different teams in the draft where they have to get X position. We talked about Philly. They have to get somebody on offense, whether it's offensive line or receiver. I'd probably go offensive line just based on being, first round. Early in the draft is when you want to get your linemen, and then later in the draft is when you want to get your skill guys. But either way, they have to get somebody on offense. The Giants have to get one of the 4 elite receivers at 11. Dallas, they have to get somebody on defense. They were 28th in the league defensively, and they were 32nd all the way until December. So they have to get somebody defensively unless a stud offensive lineman, and there's 2 of them, 2, maybe 3 in this draft, unless they just want to start the replenishing of the offensive line right away. They have to go one of those 2 positions, or they have to go either offensive line or defense, because they need to get better at those positions. You just paid Dak, so you can't have him on his bet. You can't have him getting injured again. And then defensively, you cannot be a train wreck every single week.
Look, I'll weigh in on that, because I think, all right, so we're talking about Dak again. I think have the offensive line that can surround him enough. They can play well enough to keep him safe. Maybe you go after an offensive lineman in the 2nd round or in the 3rd round, but I think 1st round has to be defense. Okay. I think in Dak, you might not, you see a game manager. Everyone's been talking about his leadership this week, since yesterday, which is great. He can lead your team. He can be a guy you want to have in the locker room. Like you talked about, you'd love to have him off the field. You said before it was a perfect type of player you'd love to coach. Leadership, game management, that's all great. He's also a guy that can keep you in games, okay? So the defense isn't performing well like we saw last year. You just said 32nd up until December, and then they finished off the season at 28th. You need Dak to be more than a guy that keeps you in shootouts. You need to win football games. So I think that kind of comes in your decision of going defense first. The second thing is, the offensive line couldn't have been performing that badly simply due to the fact that, Dak threw for 1,800 yards. He was averaging 392 yards a game, threw for 9 touchdowns, only 4 interceptions, and that was in 5 games. So I don't know. I see him being able to lead that team to victory, at least a 9-7, 10-6 record. I think, like you said, you need to go defensive player 1st round of the draft.
Yeah, they got to go defense first.
One guy that they, with the way that the draft will probably unfold this year, 5 QBs are projected to go in the top 10, which leaves a plethora of defensive guys that the Cowboys can choose from at 10. Most notably, Patrick Surtain out of Alabama comes in, steps in, takes over the cornerback 1 role for them. There's a guy like Caleb Farley out there. So there's plenty of defensive guys that the Cowboys target sitting at number 10. And who knows, they might even be able to trade back a little bit and still get the guy they want and acquire, some day 2, day 3 draft picks while doing so. So I think they should definitely target defense, especially early on. And if they could free up the money, they should definitely try to bring in some of these, well-rounded veteran guys that are going to be out there on free agency. There's going to be a lot of pass rushers out there that, you can get fairly cheap. You don't have to go out and pay a guy like Shaq Barrett. You can go, maybe get a guy like Adrian Claiborne, who just got released from the Browns. He's not going to be commanding that money, a lot of money. So, they definitely need to focus on getting that defense better while protecting Dak Prescott, because you can't just pay this guy $160 million and then have him not play a full season, So protecting Dak Prescott, making sure he does not stay on the ground this year, make sure he recovers from that knee injury or ankle injury, excuse me. And, and they need to be able to build a defense around him that can keep them in close games and can take a lot of pressure off him, so he can just go out there and be a quarterback and be a game manager. You don't have to ask him to do too much.
Yeah, and I think it's a great point you mentioned about trading back, because my rule in the draft is if you have your franchise quarterback, trade down and acquire more players, because A, you're paying your franchise quarterback big money, and B, you need more, because you're paying him big money, you need more good players. You know what I mean?
You need depth.
You need depth because you can't have a lot of high-priced guys once you start paying him. So trading back makes perfect, because they believe Dak's the franchise guy. They just gave him second biggest contract ever, right? So you're gonna have to have more depth on your team. So trading back, kind of do what Carolina did last year, but with trading back and picking just almost going all defense. And if you don't go all defense and some offensive line. Because those are the positions. I mean, look, you can draft a running back, but you're paying Zeke. So, I mean, that guy's not getting on the field. And you're wasting a good year. It doesn't make any sense.
You're wasting a draft pick and a valuable.
You also got Tony Pollard, who, when Zeke goes down, he steps in. And, he's proven he can be a bell cow. He can take a brunt of the work, and he stays healthy.
I also like you mentioning Patrick Surtain, because, they have Trevon Diggs from Alabama, who they got last year. Patrick Surtain is also from Alabama. And the nice thing about Alabama transitioning to the Cowboys is that, Alabama is a base cover 3 team. The Dallas Cowboys, with Dan Quinn now as the defensive coordinator, are going to be a base cover 3 team. So, I mean, obviously, everybody plays all the coverages. But in terms of, players, and I know this in recruiting, players are more comfortable going from when they're jumping from one level to the next, they're more comfortable doing it in familiar territory, where you're essentially doing the same stuff you did in college. You're just going to now have to do it at a higher level against better players.
Right. So that should be a good system for him to come into. I think maybe we see an uptick in Trevon Diggs' play this year as well. Seeing that Dan Quinn's back in action, which didn't end so well for him in that Super Bowl. Didn't end so well for him against Dallas this past year either. I'm interested to see what that defense looks like as a whole with Dan Quinn there now. That's a Dallas coaching staff I'm not too fond of as a unit. And I say that just because we saw it with Jason Garrett. We saw the lack of, trust given and quote unquote leash given to Jason Garrett by Jerry Jones. The question becomes, how much is Mike McCarthy able to do? Is Dan Quinn able to come in and make an immediate impact? Or do they have to figure out, are there going to be any arguments in the room? I know, Todd Bowles going to Tampa, having coached previously New York as a head coach, and there were no issues there with Bruce Arians. So I'm assuming the two will be able to work together. But you have 2 NFC past head coaches and 1 current head coach, in Dallas working together. So I'm curious to see how they mesh. I think their offense will still be with Kellen Moore under there. I think it'll still be, something to reckon with. I think they'll be, get Zeke his footing again. Dak's playing with a new level of confidence because of all this money. You still got guys in Amari Cooper and Michael Gallup. So I really think that offense can still be explosive. Do you guys have any last things to add to, Dallas, Dak Prescott, anything that happened with the deal? Which, by the way, there's a no trade clause in that deal. Just so you guys know, I think Todd France did a great job.
The Cowboys also did put the franchise tag on Dak, which is just a procedural thing, just to allow him to not be tagged again as long as he's a Dallas Cowboy. So that's another thing that probably turns Dak on to the deal. But it'll be interesting to see how Dan Quinn. It'll be interesting to see what he does with his defense, because it's a defense that does not have a lot of talent. And if you look back at his days in Atlanta, he always did not have a great defense. He always had a high-flying offense with Matt Ryan and Julio, Devonta Freeman. But he never had the star-studded defense, and he's not going to have it in Dallas. So it'll be interesting to see how he gets all those guys to come together and play.
Well, their defense should be better in Dallas than it was last year. So yeah. I think immediately it's an upgrade. Because because Atlanta was in the teens, I believe, defensively in points per game, not in terms of the amount they allowed, but where they ranked. Dallas is 28th. So the defense will be an upgrade over what it was last year. In terms of scheme fit, the players that they have, it's more similar to the defense actually, it's the same defense. It's very similar to the defense they ran when Jason Garrett was the head coach, back in 2018, 2019, when they brought Chris Richard in, who was the passing game coordinator in Seattle, who was the defensive back coach in Seattle under Dan Quinn, and replaced Dan Quinn as the defensive coordinator in Seattle. So it's the scheme they were running then when they finished 6th, followed by 12th in the league in points per game allowed. So, I know the players haven't been as good, but I also look at, were they just in foreign territory last year under Mike Nolan?
I think we're going to find out. I think that'll be really evident, come September, and when we get to take our first look at how Dallas looks in the field defensively. I think you'll kind of know based on game. Who do they have on the schedule? Game 1, do we know offhand? The
schedule hasn't been released yet.
Okay.
They released their opponents, but not. They released their home and away opponents, but not a week or anything yet.
Okay. All right. So I think if they play anybody with a credible offense in a sense, I think we'll kind of know where their defense sits at based on last year. Starting off, and then that high-scoring Atlanta game, high-scoring Seattle game, which obviously kudos to having weapons like Julio Jones, Calvin Ridley, Pro Bowler Matt Ryan, and also you look at Russ in Seattle. So you expect those to be longer games, more high-scoring games rather. I think we'll have a kind of a clear indication of where they sit at based on how many points they allow the first game. Again, if they're playing an offensive team that can actually generate points, I think that's kind of where we find out where the transition has been made from 2020 Dallas Cowboys defense to the 2021 version of it. So segueing into our boy J.J. Watt in Arizona, he just signed a contract, 2 years, $31 million with 23 guaranteed. So walk us through that. What are our thoughts? I know we talked about Cleveland being a potential. We talked about Buffalo, talked about Green Bay. So what do you guys think? He ended up in Arizona. He's now reunited with his longtime teammate DeAndre Hopkins. So what's going on?
I think the Cardinals kind of came out of nowhere on this. I don't think he was really linked to them other than D-Hop. But Cardinals get a good piece in J.J. Watt, especially if they think he can play like they're paying him to play, and they team him up with Chandler Jones. Definitely give him a good good boost off the edge. So I think it's a good move for for the Cardinals, but I don't necessarily think that puts them atop of that division. They're in a tough division. The Rams should be good this year. Seahawks will be the Seahawks. And, the 49ers, who knows, that 2 years away from a Super Bowl appearance. So they can be right back in it. It's a tough division. It's a good move for the Cardinals. J.J. Watt gets paid. There were reports out there that teams offered him a little bit more money, and I believe the Browns were one of them. But he goes to Arizona, and I know he's got a lot of faith in Kyler Murray. He reached out to him as soon as he signed. And, Cardinals should be a fun team to watch this year. They got Isaiah Simmons, who did not play very well his rookie year, but he's a extremely versatile guy who can play all over the field. You know, they got Buda Baker, who they just paid anchor in the secondary. You know, maybe they bring back Pat Peterson. So it's a team that's going to be high flying on offense, and you know they needed a couple pieces on defense, and I don't think they're done yet. I think they'll try to bring in some more help in the secondary, a couple more veteran guys, and it'll be fun to watch. It'll be a good division of football this year.
I think that's the best division in football. Ranging back to last year, you just have so many. Anyone could fire off at any time. Teams get hot. You know, you got certain teams that beat certain teams, like Seattle always has a problem with the Rams. You got the 49ers who came out of nowhere last year, had a lot of injuries this year. It's a very spicy, fiery division. A lot of talent, a lot of competition. I think that's a good landing spot for them, competition-wise. I mean, you know, sorry, not to cut you out, but they're probably going to be at least two teams coming out of that division again this year in that playoff run.
I could definitely see three coming out of there, but I think this year the Cardinals have to make the playoffs, or I think Cliff Kingsbury is low key on the hot seat this year. You know, I think they will make moves to get that roster up to shape, but you know the Cardinals definitely are set up to make a playoff push, and it needs to happen this year. Or you definitely need to question the coaching staff there, because is it Kyler Murray? Probably not. Kyler Murray's a good player, and he'll continue to progress as he goes into year 3 here. So it's really on Cliff Kingsbury and that coaching staff.
Well, yeah, I think it is. I don't think you could put the blame around your quarterback who's been playing, you know, pretty well, again, all things considered, over the past couple of years. I think it's really fun to watch Kyler Murray. I think it ultimately falls on the responsibility of the coaching staff. We see it all the time. We saw it, you know, in Dallas. We were talking about that earlier. You saw it in Houston with Bill O'Brien. I mean, you see guys in the hot seat, guys get fired, and then depending on who you bring in, that's obviously you're trying to make a change. You're trying to make your team and your organization better. Well, that's what you got to do. I don't think it's on Kyler Murray, but you have to remember too. I know we'll get into New England a little bit later. I know we've had our conversations about New England in the past. Obviously, you know, growing up in Massachusetts and Rhode Island. It's not like it was in New England where you're playing Buffalo and New York and Miami twice a year. You're playing LA twice a year. You're playing San Francisco twice a year. You're playing Seattle twice a year. Okay, there's more to just, you know, playing the blame game on the internal when you also have to worry about winning. You know, you're realistically trying to win 4 of those games a year to be in the playoff hunt. So I think it all boils down to the level of difficulty when it comes to their division, when it comes to the rest of their schedule. Because if they're rolling through teams like Chicago or, you know, whoever in the outer division interconference pool, they might have a shot at going, you know, 11-5, 10-6 this year. But they have to beat that 9-7 hump. They have to win 4 games in that division. And ultimately, I think if they can do that, this is a very good landing spot for J.J. Watt.
And I think they can do that there. I think that's one division you look at and say any team can win that division. And I think the reason J.J. Watt went to Arizona is because, you know, because the Browns and the Colts offered more money. But Arizona is much more settled at quarterback than the other two. In fact, I would say Arizona is the most settled team at quarterback in the NFC West.
You're not wrong in saying that. You're not wrong in saying that.
He's not the best right now, but he's the most settled. I mean, Seattle, who knows what's going on? Could Russell Wilson leave tomorrow? Could Jimmy Garoppolo? I mean, he's not leaving tomorrow. If we were, we'd be talking about it. But, you know, could Russell Wilson leave? Could Jimmy Garoppolo leave, which we're going to talk about a little later?
Yeah, and Matthew Stafford was just introduced to the division.
Matthew Stafford just introduced to the division, but he's only on a 2-year contract.
Right.
So, you know, if he's a down year, you know, one of the next 2 years, he's not going to be there much longer. You know, so Kyler is the one guy I could look at and say who is most likely to be the quarterback for their team in that division in 2023? It's Kyler Murray. Now, J.J. Watt's not supposed to be there in 2023, at least based on his contract. But he could be, number one. Number two, you figure this. Kyler is he's eligible for an extension in 2022. So Kyler has another good year, takes another step forward. He's getting an extension in the spring of 2022. And it's not going to be dragged out like the Dak Prescott thing. That's going to get done. You know, we talked about Cliff Kingsbury. I agree. He's got to go 9-7. I don't think there's a playoff mandate, but I think there's a winning season mandate. because they were right on the cusp last year. They were 6-3, and then Kyler Murray hurt his shoulder, and they weren't the same team. Once Kyler wasn't able to run the same way because his shoulder got injured, they no longer were as good offensively because really they were a run-first offense. Their offense was better at running the ball. They were the number 1 rushing team in the league their first 9 games in terms of yards per carry. I know Baltimore led it in total yards, but in terms of yards per carry, Arizona was the number 1 rushing team in the league with Kyler, Kenyon Drake, and Chase Edmonds. Excuse me. That's a good triumvirate of runners. Plus, you're going to have RPO game, being an air raid team. You're running that college offense. You're going to have RPO game. You got DeAndre Hopkins, Larry Fitzgerald still playing, Christian Kirk, Andy Isabella, who's got speed. So offensively, that team should be rolling. So the nice thing, and what do we say about J.J. Watt? He's going to go to a team that has a good offense because he's going to want to play with leads where he can go get sacks. J.J. Watt's in the kind of time of his career, he'll stop the run. He'll still play hard against the run. But those older defensive linemen, they want to go after the quarterback. They want to play limited snaps. They want to go after the quarterback, and they want to pin their ears back. So J.J. Watt should have the opportunity to do that in Arizona. Now, defensively in Arizona, I think they ranked 12th or 13th last year, which was an upgrade over 27th or 28th where they were the year before. So Vance Joseph did a good job of that defense. He's now got more of the players in the right positions. I know we talked about Isaiah Simmons. And I know he's a very versatile player, great athlete, but that's not really what that defense requires. Vance Joseph learned under Wade Phillips in Houston. So the Wade Phillips defense is very straightforward. You have this position, and then he's going to give you a lot of freedom in that position to freelance, which we've talked about previously. But it's a very, if you're the Sam linebacker, you have this is your role. If you're the Will linebacker, this is your role. So Isaiah Simmons' role in that defense is as the Mo linebacker. Now, they have inside linebackers who are free agents, so he could be he'll probably be the Mo. The Mo linebacker is an inside linebacker. It's normally called the Will for most 3-4 teams, which is at Arizona is a base 3-4. The Mo linebacker is a traditional linebacker. That's a downhill gap fit kind of guy. That's not really, Isaiah Simmons can do that, but that's not really what he was at Clemson. So, he's a good enough athlete that I believe he can do it, but, there's some coaching that has to be done there. Back to JJ. I think this Arizona team could be really good. And look, with that, and like I said, last episode, it's tough to make predictions in March. Really, you can't start making predictions until after day 2 of the draft.
Right.
So
coming on us fast, coming up on us quick.
Coming up on us. Oh, I keep on looking at mock draft stuff, but free agency hasn't even started yet. So what's even the point?
Yeah. One more week.
So look, Arizona, that could be a really good team, or they could finish in last place. They could even be a really good team and finish in last place. That's kind of
the Wild
the
West.
way life works in the NFC West.
Well, that's really what it is. Wild West. That is the Wild West of football right there this upcoming year. Hold me to that. I think we should introduce some kind of betting segment throughout the show. And when we do, this is one thing I would like to put my money on prior to the season starting, that this is the most competitive division in football.
See what happens with Russ. If Russ leaves Seattle, it really should just, the Cardinals should be able to control that division with the Rams, keeping it close.
One thing about Rams Cardinals is that the Rams own the Cardinals.
Yeah.
It's kind of interesting in that division. The Rams own the Cardinals. The
Cardinals own the 49ers.
The Rams own the Cardinals. The Rams don't own the Seahawks, but they usually beat them.
They beat them when it counts.
They beat they beat them.
Other than division, they beat them in the playoffs.
2 for 3 this year.
2 for 3 this year. And then, you have the 49ers own the Rams, which is why Jared Goff isn't there anymore. And then, because even Nick Mullins beat him last year. The Cardinals give the 49ers problems every time they play them, even though the 49ers usually win those games. The one rivalry in that division that is up in the air always is 49ers Seahawks.
Yeah.
And I'd even say Seahawks Cardinals now is too. 49ers Seahawks and Seahawks Cardinals are kind of, which again, Seattle, they never play a normal game. Those are the two matchups in that division. They go either way. And so that's what makes that division so difficult to predict, is that even though there's so many teams that play well against the other, there's still enough variance that you just don't know.
Yeah, you don't know. And again, you need 4 wins coming out of that division this year to make a playoff, I think.
Yeah, at least.
Yeah, at least. I think the 4 might be the second team coming out of the division, the 6th seed or the 7th seed, whatever that might end up being. Or maybe who knows? We'll get into that. We got a long way to go for that. We just had the Super Bowl, which people here are still celebrating a little bit. Not crazy.
If the 49ers can get back to where they were 2 years ago, this could be a division that sends all 4 teams to the playoffs with how the playoff format's set up and stuff. So that'd be something cool to see if a division could send all 4 teams.
Well, yeah, with the 18 playoff, that changes the game completely. Quick, before we hop into New England and we hop into the playoff structure, so the NFL and the players of the union just came to an agreement with a reduced salary cap. They went from 198.2 to 182.5. So that's a $15.7 million difference. Just got that news right as we were starting to record the podcast. So I just want to let you guys know that. You guys have any thoughts on that?
I mean, it was expected to go down this year with everything that's going on in the world, but it's supposed to. Some are projecting it to jump up 25 million next year, and it should be over 200 million. As we continue to roll through here. So it decreased by 8% this year, but I think a lot of owners are expecting it to shoot way up, and I think you could also tie Dak and Jerry Jones. Jerry Jones there's a huge TV deal coming that will give teams more flexibility with money and stuff. So he put all his cards on the table and gave Dak what he wanted.
Yeah, I mean, broadcasting revenue and league sharing is such a crazy concept nowadays too, where the NFL just generates so much in advertisements. It's like you said, television and broadcast deals, and that all gets swindled into how teams spend their salary money. So maybe he does know something. O'Malley, didn't mean to jump the gun there.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you mentioned that, because one of the classes I'm taking right now is sport finance, and we just took an exam last week, and one of the things that was on the exam was about kind of how broadcast revenues they pay the salary cap in the NFL.
They do. It's
I mean, more than 100% of the salary of how much you're paying is covered by the salary cap, whereas the other sports rely more on gate revenues.
Right, because the NFL has the league sharing model, so everything that is made in mutual. So that's why no matter everyone's on each other's team in the off season and for generating interest in the games, because those teams are making that money back and then in turn spending it on more players. So essentially, we the fans are paying for their product they're putting on the field indirectly, and a lot of people don't even know that.
No, and that's why, and again, that's why people have been paying, for cable television and paying for all these streaming services that show all these channels, all these sports channels. That's how these players are getting paid, and that's how. And like you said, people just don't know that. So you get people that are older, and they're watching TV and they'll never turn on an NFL game or any other sport, and yet they're paying these players' salaries.
Right. And not the ad sense, but the ad space in that regard too, is other companies in naming. It's just, there's so much that goes in the sport. I love it. I love the business of sport.
Oh, I do too.
So I mean, what do you think about the cap hit? I know somebody just gave us his thoughts on it. As far as the NFL goes, any other thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, look, a lot of teams are in the red this year that wouldn't have been in the red previously. So, and there was a report that came out either early this week or late last week that a lot of good players are going to get cut. And watch June 1st, because teams can lessen their dead cap hit if they cut guys after June 1st versus cutting them today. So there's almost going to be there's almost always 4 free agency periods anyway. There's obviously the one when the league year starts. There's right after the draft for the undrafted free agents. There's after June 1st, and then there's after training camp and preseason when all the when guys get cut off for rosters. But this year, that June 1st one might almost be bigger than the March 17th one.
Just to add to that pre and post June 1st, Drew Brees could retire today and leave the Saints with a $10 million cap hit. But if he waits till post June 1, that dead cap number gets cut in half. So he could just be waiting and dragging this announcement out to help the Saints financially moving forward. And not to mention, he already took a pay cut to get paid league minimum to free up all this money for the Saints to allow them to shake up their roster and stuff.
Yeah, and that's just the kind of guy Drew Brees is. He's always been about the Saints and about the community of New Orleans, and so I wouldn't be surprised at all if we find out June 1st or June 2nd Drew Brees getting cut for that reason.
I wouldn't be surprised if Drew Brees is on the field in September of 2021 for the Saints. I really think there's a real possibility he comes back.
It's real enough. I mean, he was posting workout videos on Instagram, so he's definitely thinking about it.
Isn't that crazy how that's the cue now? Like, we know it's a possibility because of social media and because of a workout. I work out. Doesn't mean I'm going to play another season in the NFL. But it's
that's
crazy.
That's how Cam got his deal with the Patriots.
Yeah, social media.
They knew he was serious about it because they saw him working out on Instagram.
And it changes the perception of an athlete too. When you show things like that, it gets the fans excited. It gets people who might not have been on your side excited, and then all of a sudden, coaches and scouts are talking about you. So it really does help to improve people's brands from a social media standpoint. But so what else do you guys want to hit today? We've talked about JJ. We've talked about Dak. We've talked about the salary cap in the NFL. What is going on in New England? I've heard some rumors that I was made aware of earlier today and yesterday by the two of you. What's going on in New England?
Well, obviously they just traded back for Trent Brown, who they let walk as a free agent in 2019 after they won the Super Bowl. Kind of backstory or a bit of a story here. I was in a clinic talk at the beginning of March in 2019 at the big New England coaches clinic where Dante Scarnecchia was the keynote speaker. And during his presentation, he said he wanted the Patriots to bring Trent Brown back. And then a couple of weeks later, he got the highest, biggest offensive line contract of all time by Chucky and Mike Mayock out in Oakland. So I don't know what Scarnecchia's reaction to that was, but he retired not too long after that. But so they bring Trent Brown back. I'm assuming, and this isn't I haven't read anything from the team, and not that they would announce this anyway because they don't announce things they don't have to. But I'm assuming they're going to put him at left tackle, put him back because that's where he was when he was here the first time. And then they're going to stick with Michael O at I don't know how to say his last name at right tackle, the rookie right tackle who played really well. The interior offensive line is arguably the best in the league, with Tooney, Andrews, and Shaq Mason at right guard.
And they're not franchise tagging Tooney, by the way.
They're not franchise tagging Tooney. So they could put Isaiah Wynn at left guard then. He might be a better guard than tackle, which is what people were saying when he was coming out of the draft. You had something to say?
It will be interesting. I think Trent Brown will go to right tackle. I think they'll leave Wynn at left tackle. I think they'll keep Michael O at left guard. And I think the Trent Brown trade solidifies Joe Tooney's departure.
Yes.
I kind of think they'll switch their focus to bringing back David Andrews, who's been the heartbeat of that offensive line, good leader since he came undrafted to New England. And and that leaves Marcus Cannon out, who Patriots could cut, free up $7 million. He was an opt-out last year for COVID, so they do have him coming back. So it'll see how they deploy this line. Bill Belichick, he likes guys that can play all over the line. So, during preseason training camp, he'll shuffle it around, and ultimately he'll have the 5 best linemen out there.
And I'm glad you mentioned David Andrews because, one of the things that wasn't talked about and as to why the Patriot offense declined in the last year of Tom Brady was that David Andrews missed the entire year.
Yeah.
So obviously we noticed that they didn't have receivers. Sony Michel didn't really pan out at running back, and James Devlin got injured. Yeah, those are all big losses, but, those are all important. But once David Andrews came back, they were suddenly able to run the ball again, unlike 2019. And obviously Damian Harris being a running back helps that out. But, really, they make the Trent Brown move, but now you look at, they still don't have quarterback. They still don't have wide receiver. Those are, in my opinion, right now, the two most important positions of football. Just looking at the game is more athletic than it's ever been. And, why they're kind of the two most athletic positions now, because we've been talking about this for years, especially when we were coaching at Johnson & Wales. And that's kind of why we made our depth chart the way it was. A lot of teams are putting their best athlete at quarterback.
Right.
And so,
it's a huge advantage.
It is a huge advantage. I mean, so now, right now, for them at quarterback, as it was reported that plan A by a wide margin is Jimmy Garoppolo. And obviously they had Garoppolo before. He was their plan A after Brady when they were, when what the rift that went on there that forced that led Bob Kraft to force Belichick to trade Garoppolo. So they now want to bring Garoppolo back. So it could end up just being, the same thing that they wanted from the beginning, which was Garoppolo is going to be the guy. The problem with that is Garoppolo's on another team. So what do you do? I mean, you're either going to have to swing a trade back for Garoppolo, which is realistic given the fact that Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch don't love him. I mean, it took a lot of leaks for John Lynch to come out and say, Jimmy Garoppolo is our quarterback. And things only leak from organizations when people want them leaked. So they're in on Deshaun Watson. I believe that they inquired on Kirk Cousins, because Kyle Shanahan has a previous relationship with Kirk Cousins going back to Washington. Even Teddy Bridgewater, they've been in on. The way I look at it is this. New England getting Jimmy Garoppolo would be an upgrade for them. The problem they would then have is they still need receivers. Here's the real problem that I see for New England, whether they get Garoppolo or not. What is the plan? Like, what is the plan there? I know, Smitty, you're still a Pats fan. Like, if Jimmy G is plan A, that's fine, but you got to be able to get him. And I don't know. I mean, it shouldn't cost too much to get him, but I just think it's tough when your plan A is on someone else's team.
Right. But, we mentioned earlier all these surprising cuts that could be coming up. And I think Jimmy G is going to be one of the guys that gets cut by the 49ers. But if you're the Patriots and you want Jimmy G to be your plan A, I don't see why you wouldn't try to trade maybe a day 2 pick, second round, third round, maybe for him. I'd probably go
second round pick back.
Yeah. And he does not care. He doesn't have the best contract, but in the quarterback market today, he's only going to cost you around $25 million. And for a viable starting quarterback in today's market, that's very good. But like you did mention, you can bring Tom Brady back for all it matters. But who's he going to throw to? And you got to kind of acquire some receiving talent before you can go in and get a QB. So I expect the Patriots to be very, very active trying to bring in some of these guys. One guy as a Patriots fan that I'd love for them to bring in is Hunter Henry. Put all your cards on the table for Hunter Henry. He can receive, he can block for you, he can do whatever you want for him to do. And you just got to pay the guy, and you have the money for the first time in years to pay people. So I expect Bill Belichick to make some splashes. You're beefing up the offensive line. And, New England has always been a team that has a great offensive line. They love running the football. Running the football will be their plan A attack. And, if you want to bring in Jimmy G, he's a guy who's familiar with the system, familiar with the coaching staff. He knows what it takes to be a Patriot. And, it's interesting to think what Jimmy G could have been if we had hung on to him and let Brady walk a little earlier.
I mean, yeah, you're talking about a guy who was just at an NFC championship a year ago. I think he would have been a viable fit for New England, having that been the transition from Brady to Garoppolo straight out the gate. That's not how it played out, obviously. I think he had to go do his thing somewhere else. I think he was kind of wasting away sitting on the bench. But I think the Patriots would be really excited to have him back in the locker room, preferably as a starter. No news on Cam Newton yet. Whether or not they're going to re-sign him. I keep hearing Belichick is highly favored of him, but he hasn't decided or hasn't spoken on whether or not he wants him to return to the locker room. So Jimmy G can play. I mean, Kyle Shanahan's not too big on him. I get that. He didn't really prove anything to me this past year, but you're talking about a guy who's better than at least 15 guys out of, the 32 that are starting somewhere. I think he ranks up easily the top 15, maybe the top 12. I think he needs to be somewhere starting at quarterback this next year. I think New England would be a great place for him. And I think, like you mentioned earlier, Ian, it really depends how that Houston, trade goes down for Deshaun Watson, if they end up trading him, if they don't, because, if you're Houston and you're comfortable taking Jimmy Garoppolo, or you're comfortable taking Teddy Bridgewater and picks, or Sam Darnold even in picks, that's going to decide whether or not New England ends up with any of those guys. You're not getting Jimmy Garoppolo if Houston's willing to trade for Jimmy Garoppolo in a first rounder and a third and whatever the case might be. You're not going to end up with Jimmy Garoppolo. So what do you do as New England? You close that gate with Brady. He's not coming back. He loves Tampa. They just won a Super Bowl. He's going for 2, might be going for 3. You might not get Jimmy Garoppolo. Do you re-sign Cam Newton? Do you play with Stidham? I mean, what do you do as New England moving forward?
I think you re-sign if you don't. So we're saying if you don't get Jimmy G.
If you don't get Jimmy G, if he's not available.
All right, then if you don't get Jimmy G, I think you re-sign Cam Newton. I think you go after. I know Smitty's been big on Hunter Henry.
Yep.
I also think you should throw Kenny Golladay in the mix if you can even get both. And then because then what that allows you to do is then you can kind of sit back in the draft and see kind of how because if you get, although, I mean, then again, you bring in Cam Newton, you still need another guy, so you still can't sit back. So I think if you bring Cam Newton, if you bring back Cam and you're able to do something in free agency to upgrade the wide receiver position, which, I mean, pretty much this calculator would be an upgrade over what they've been at wide receiver the last couple of years. That still might not be enough. So, I mean, they're going to have to upgrade receiver. I understand, Smitty, where you're coming from with they're going to get receiver first before they get quarterback, because even if they get quarterback right, that he's not going to have anybody to throw to. So say you get Hunter Henry, I'd be in on Kenny Golladay.
Yep,
I'd bring
still
Cam
draft
back.
A receiver.
You can still draft a receiver, but by the way, you bring Cam back, you're still going to need an answer at quarterback in 2022. I mean, you're probably going to have to make a trade up into the top. You're probably going to have to make a trade at worst in front of San Francisco.
They're at 15. Excuse me. They're at 15, correct?
Yes, they're at 15. So San Francisco's at 12.
So even if San Francisco beats them out, or you trade, I don't think you trade down if you're New England. I think if you're taking a quarterback, I think it's already kind of you're trading up. But from what I understand, they're looking at Mac Jones, unless they can trade up, get into that top 5 mix. I think they get Mac Jones if they're looking for a quarterback. If not, I think they get one of the receivers we named last week, whether it be Chase or Smith, or whether it be Kyle Pitts. So I personally, if I'm New England, if I'm in that GM room, I'm thinking, or war room rather, I'm thinking we go after Kenny Golladay, like you said. We go after Hunter Henry at the tight end position. Now we have a little bit more versatility. We still have Sony Michel. We still have a backfield. We have a strong offensive line. Re-sign Cam Newton for 1 more year, make him work, change the playbook around, make it a little bit more suitable. You got Matt Patricia coming back on defense. You should have 6 of your starters who opted out from COVID back on the field on defense. Now you're in the run again. You're a 7-9 team. You beat Baltimore. maybe this year you're 10-6 and you come in second in that division. I mean, we've talked about Miami, we've talked about Buffalo. That it's going to be the AFC East if New England's getting back to their old ways or in any shape or form. And I know that's an argument for another day. But if they're in that tier of play, that's a very fun division to watch. It might be second, if not on par with the NFC West. And then again, I get one of those 4 guys. So you surround whoever you bring in, whether it's Cam Newton to one more, whether you get lucky and land Garoppolo, by sending over a pick. However that situation unfolds, if you have a quarterback who can throw the football, just physically throw it like you or I can, Smitty, then you get Kenny Golladay, you get Hunter Henry, and then, if you draft one of those guys, now you're looking at some talent on the offensive side. Now you're looking at 3 guys, you can go to, you have a running game, you have an established defense, and now you're competing. So I think ultimately that's the move you have to make, and we'll see what Belichick's doing in this year's draft.
Yeah, if you want to roll with a veteran guy, I mean, if you don't want to roll with a Jimmy G or a Cam Newton, you got to trade up in this year's draft. Probably, you're saying above the 49ers. I'm going to say you have to probably get above the Broncos at 9. Broncos aren't sold on Luck. Lock. You got Detroit sitting there with Goff. He's not the long-term answer. You got the Panthers at 8 that have obviously are in the QB market. So any team in the top 10 could go QB, with the exception of maybe the Dolphins.
Yeah, I don't think
at 3
quarterback.
Cincinnati won't at 5 with drafting Joe Burrow. So yeah, if the Patriots want to go after one of these rookie guys, they gotta trade up, and that's just something Belichick does not do often. But if Belichick wants a guy, he'll go after him. He's done it with Dante Hightower. They traded up for him. And I want to say it was like 2010, 2011. Wow. Traded up to get him. 2012.
Yep.
Bill Belichick's a guy who loves trading back, acquiring day 2, day 3 picks. So, if they're not in love with someone at 15, they'll trade back. If one of the top receivers is sitting there, Waddle, Smith, or Jamar Chase, pull the trigger on him, even if Kyle Pitts is sitting there, which probably won't happen. Or they can, pick the best player available at 15, which is something they like to do too. You can never have too much depth. They've been linked to Micah Parsons, linebacker. He could succeed Dante Hightower after this year, who's going to be playing on his final year of his deal. So it's plenty of ways the Patriots can go. But, if you're not in love with – if you're not going to go after one of these veteran guys, you got to trade up and try to make a home run in the draft.
I think even if they bring Cam back, they got to trade up in the draft and get one of these guys, because Cam is not the answer after this. Cam's not even the answer this year. I mean, he can be the answer for your week 1 starter, but going into 2022, they have to know who the guy is. So I think if they bring Cam back, they got to trade up anyway. If they trade for Jimmy G, they don't have to. Now they might want to trade up for a receiver, but then if you bring in Jimmy G and you're able to bring in either Golladay or Henry, then you don't have to trade up. Then you can actually start trading back again.
Yeah.
And because really you don't want to trade back if you don't. You only want to trade back if you have your franchise quarterback. If you have any doubt about your quarterback whatsoever, either stay put or trade up, because you need players or you need a quarterback.
Absolutely. So does anyone have anything else they want to add to that conversation?
Just to add for the Patriots, you don't want to go out and pay a guy like Kenny Golladay. You can, go out and look at a guy like Corey Davis, who won't command a lot of money. Will Fuller will command a little bit more money than him, but he's not going to command as much as Kenny Golladay would. So there's plenty of options for the Patriots to upgrade their receiver room.
So franchise tag deadline was yesterday. Chris Godwin was tagged by the Bucks. I would have preferred Shaq Barrett personally. I think, with how many receivers that the Bucks have and how many guys they have in the pipeline, I don't think bringing Chris Godwin back was priority number 1, but he's a very good player, and it's tough to let very good players leave. The Giants, they brought back Leonard Williams on the franchise tag. That was big for them. He led the team in sacks last year. But obviously, their best presence on the defensive line. That still leaves wide receiver and edge rushers their 2 biggest needs in the draft. And then, Smitty, you had a point about Allen Robinson.
Yeah, I mean, he got tagged, but I think it's going to be an ugly couple of months. I don't think he's gonna sign it. The poor guy's been surrounded by awful QB play his entire career. He wants to get out and go play with a real quarterback. So hey, if the Bears can bring in somebody like Russ Wilson, or if they can land Deshaun Watson or something like that, great for Allen Robinson. But if he's catching balls from Mitch Trubisky and Nick Foles next year, he ain't gonna be a happy guy. So it'll be kind of fun to see this play out, because I think he's either gonna get paid or he's gonna want to go play somewhere else. But we'll see how Matt Nagy and Ryan Pace, kind of take care of them, and we'll see what kind of upgrades they can make at the QB position, because it's obviously a need that they need, because Mitchell Trubisky is not an answer. Nick Foles, not an answer. So just get the guy a QB. Pay the guy or get him a QB.
Or both.
Yeah.
Or both. But, you look at the Bears cap situation, there's teams out there that can pay Allen Robinson a lot more than the Bears can.
Right. In a better environment as well for him. And then to add to your point about Godwin, started off there with the franchise tags, and then Levante David was extended by the Bucks. So you got these two guys coming back. I'm excited about that as well.
Yeah, they're probably going to bring Gronk back and bring Ndamukong Suh back. Who knows what AB? And Leonard Fournette's probably going to walk just because they don't need to have two running backs. You don't need to pay a free agent running back. And then, probably Shaq Barrett's going to definitely test the market, because pass rushers command a pretty penny.
Yeah. And then what do we think? I know we're kind of on our way out, but what do we think lastly about Aaron Jones not getting the tag in Green Bay there?
He's leaving.
Yeah.
He's they drafted A.J. Dillon. They don't like I said last time, they don't like to pay people. So that's the drawback of not having an owner. Like if Jerry Jones is in Green Bay, Aaron Jones getting paid, actually he's getting overpaid.
Yeah.
But that's one of the things by having an owner is that they get deals done. If we need to get the cost doesn't matter as much to them, because they're billionaires. They've just been paying for stuff and making so much money that they don't even notice they paid for things. Whereas not having an owner, it's more frugal there. So Aaron Jones is on his way out, and I know we were thinking about Miami kind of last time.
Yep.
This is good for Jones. The way the running back market's going, teams are not going to be dishing out money, to these running backs, because they are replaceable. They have a short shelf life. So if I'm Aaron Jones, I'm going to go get paid right now while I can, and you try to get some guaranteed money out of that, a lot of guaranteed money. And, you look at a team that can give away the guaranteed money. Dolphins fit the description. They have a need at running back. They got good play out of Myles Gaskin, but he's not a 3-down back in a bell cow. So, Jones should go get paid, but I think the Packers will try to work something out to bring him back on a cheap deal. And if you're Jones and you don't want to take the money and you want to play next to Aaron Jones, you want to play next to Aaron Rodgers, then you do that. But the opportunity will be out there to get paid.
Absolutely. Yeah, just too much talent at back there for Aaron Jones. I think he goes and gets paid, and obviously we'll see how that plays out over the course of the next few weeks. We probably won't see anything for another week or so on that, but keep our eyes peeled for it. And did we mention Emmanuel Sanders was just released?
No, we did not. Emmanuel Sanders was just released, and we've been talking about cap casualties. Guys are going to get cut. He fits the description. He didn't really have that productive of a year for the Saints, even with Michael Thomas out. And the Saints are so far over the cap that they need any relief they can get.
Right. So Emmanuel Sanders getting cut out of New Orleans. I'm just kind of segueing. Does anyone else have anything they want to add to the podcast?
I think we talked about a lot today, and I know there's going to be a lot more to talk about next week.
Yep. Plenty of NFL news coming. NFL new league year starts in a week.
March 17th, St. Patty's Day. Can't wait to cover it. O'Malley will be here with his Shamrock Shake. I will be there with a green bottle of beer. So two sides to that story. But thank you guys for joining us on episode 3 of the Jet Series NFL podcast.